there's two very specific mistakes that salespeople make. The two greatest mistakes that salespeople make. The number one mistake that salespeople make is we simply do not ask for the order, or we delay in asking for the order. We're afraid to ask for the order. Let's go back to that now. When could your customer say yes? In the collision repair world, when could they say yes? Could they say yes the minute they have a wreck and call you up and say, come and get my car, you're going to fix it? They do all the time, right? Sure they do. They can. Okay, so we have to know that. So my answer is, when is it appropriate to ask for the order? Whenever you believe they have enough information that they could say yes. You won't know how much information they have until you ask for the order. Something like, would you like for us to just handle everything? That's a sales close. It's appropriate. It's a soft close. I actually call that the magic close. When you learn how to ask somebody, can I just take care of everything for you, that works very well. So the biggest mistake salespeople make is we simply don't ask for the order. Now I'm going to tell you what the second biggest mistake salespeople make is. We talk about things that don't interest the customer. We spend time talking about things that don't interest the customer because we've been taught that people buy for technical reasons. Well, according to the Sandler Selling Institute, something I read a number of years ago, it said this: 80% of the purchasing decisions that people make are actually emotional, not logical. So all of your cognition that you've been taught to spew in order to sell your product or your service is probably a waste. Because people buy for their reasons, not yours. People buy on emotion, not logic. So the second biggest mistake that salespeople make is they talk about things that don't interest the customer. I wonder if we ever do that. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine was in his early 60s, lived in Northern California, owned a real estate company, owned part of a real estate company. In his agreement, I believe it was at 62, he had to sell out. It was part of his buy-sell agreement. So at 62, he sold his share of the real estate company and he had a lot of money. First time in his life, he had like a lot of cash. Now this fellow talks in a very down-home, colloquial way, kind of the country part of Northern California. He said, you know, I always wanted to buy me one of them hot rod little Mercedes sports cars. But he said, I never wanted to buy one when I was selling real estate because I didn't want to look too flashy. You notice he and I are just alike. He said, I didn't want to look too flashy, but he said, I always wanted me one. This is a little bit like somebody going out and buying a boat or a watch or, you know, something that marks this very important time of their life. I always wanted to buy a hot rod little Mercedes sports car. So he goes down to the kind of local-ish, nearby Mercedes dealer, and he walks in, and there's a salesman there. The salesman says to him, can I help you, sir? And he goes, yeah. He said, I think I want to buy one of them hot rod little Mercedes sports cars you're selling right there. Car's sitting right outside the showroom window. To which our salesman says, okay, sir, let me see if I can find a brochure for you. And he goes and gets him a brochure, and he starts talking to him about some of the technical advantages of this car. Now think about it. If you're a salesman and somebody just pointed at your product and said, I want to buy me one of them, do they need a brochure? They need to move on with the sales process. It don't get no better than this. This customer's already said yes in his heart. Salesman says, yeah, let me grab a brochure and show you. This car is really neat. You know, it's 2012 model. It'll get to 24 miles a gallon while out on the road, and it still has 400 horsepower. So he's telling him that the car gets good gas mileage. Now my buddy's in his mind is telling me, he says, I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to spend $100,000 for this car. I really don't care if it has a 5-gallon gasoline toilet on top of the engine, and every time I step on it, it dumps it out on the ground. He says, I can afford it, you know. I don't care if it gets good gas mileage. It has nothing to do with why I'm buying the car. But he says, I do what customers do. I fake like I'm interested in what the salesman is telling me. This salesman who's talking about things that don't interest the customer. He says, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I'll keep that in mind. But being a professional seller himself, he's kind of turned off by this sales approach, so he leaves thinking, you know, I'm just go down into San Francisco and buy a car. They got professional salespeople down there, and that'll be a lot better for me. So he leaves. He goes home, talks to Barbara, his wife. Barbara says, how'd it go? Did you buy your car? And he says, nah. He says, those people don't know how to sell a car there. They want to tell me about gas mileage and stuff, and I just wanted to buy the car, so I'm going to go down to San Francisco a couple hours away and buy a car. No, you are not, says Barbara. You get back there and you make them sell you a car, because I'm not going to listen to you whine and complain every time you have to deal with San Francisco traffic to take this thing to get it serviced. Now get back there. Next day he goes back there and he walks in. He gets salesman number 2. Salesman says, "Can I help you, sir?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think I want to buy that hot rod little Mercedes sports car sitting right there." To which our salesman says, "Okay, sir, let me get a brochure for you." So they'd had a real technical word track taught. So they give him a brochure, and this salesman talks to him about the brakes. He wants to tell him about these newfangled disc brakes that are bigger and cooler and they stop better. And he says, in his mind, at this point, he doesn't even care if it's got brakes. He wants the car to go. This guy wants it to stop. We're at different ends of the world. But he says, "I do what I did before. I took the brochure. I looked at it. I faked like I was interested. I was trying to be nice. And yeah, okay, well, that's interesting. I'll talk to my wife about it. I'll see you later. Bye." And he leaves. Goes home. Barbara says, "Get back there." So he does. Third day, gets the dealer principal himself. Dealer principal's a cool guy. He knows how to sell. He uses a sales close that might shock you. You see, I think this guy had studied what they call NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, where probably he had learned how to kind of copy the state and behavior of the prospect. So, because people tend to like people like themselves. Walks in and dealer principal recognized him. He says, "Hey, haven't you been in here before?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "I've been trying to buy one of them hot rod little Mercedes sports cars you guys are selling." And he says, "Oh, well, why in the world would you want one of them things anyway?" And this is a sales story. But I'm telling you, that's not that bad of a close, because who are we talking about now? When you ask the question, why in the world would you want one of them things, you probably wouldn't say it that way. I wouldn't say it that way. But isn't that a better sales close than just parroting on a whole bunch of crap, techno-weenie stuff that you care about? Talking about things that don't interest the customer. Now we're finding out what interests the customer. So my buddy says he wasn't prepared for the question. He goes, "First thing I could think of was, I hear they're fast." And the guy says, "Yeah, they're fast." And they describe some hill outside of town where you can stomp on it and it'll pin you back all the way down to the bottom of this San Ramon Hill or whatever it's called. He said, so this guy kind of got, he says, another little trick the guy used, which was good salesmanship. He says he goes out and he puts the key in the door. And now keep this in mind, 80-degree day, Northern California, brand new car, sun shining, drops the window about this far and stops and says, "Take a whiff of that car." He got the guy to smell the car because he knew that's the reason people buy stuff. They like the new car smell. They like that heat coming off of that leather interior in a Northern California sun. So he says he gets to buy the car. And he's driving home. And he said, he understands sales. He knows that people buy for their own reasons, not the salesperson's reasons. And as he was discussing with himself as he's driving the car home, why is it that I really wanted to buy the car? And he finally came to the conclusion, and it may surprise you, the conclusion was because he hated his neighbor's guts. That's the reason he was buying the car. Yep, I hate my neighbor's guts because, he said, I've lived next to this guy for 20 years. For 20 years, this fella has always played the one-upsmanship game. Like I get a new lawn tractor last year, a John Deere, and he goes out immediately and buys a better one, and always saying his lawn tractor is better than mine. And he says, I really know that he wanted the car because he's the first person that had showed me a brochure on this hot rod little Mercedes sports car and said that was his target when he could finally afford it. And I know he can't afford it. He's upside down in his car right now, and I can, and I wanted to be the first on the block to get this car. But he says, I'm not going to tell a salesman that. So as he's driving home, fully hating his neighbor, but loving the fact that he's finally got a one-upsmanship, he says he knows, as perverted as it sounds, it must have been okay with God or the universe or something, because he says as he's driving home, just before he whips into his driveway, he catches out of the corner of his eye, but his neighbor riding the John Deere lawn tractor in his own yard, and he's thinking, this is too good to be true. So he pulls up into the driveway. He does what you always do when you get a new car. You stop doing this at some point, I'm not sure when, but you got a brand new $100,000 car. You don't just get out and walk in the house. So you get out and you kind of step back and admire it, He said probably part of me was goading the neighbor into coming over to see me. So he says, I'm kind of walking around the car, admiring it. Neighbor, I hear the tractor shut off. It's almost like he heard angels in heaven singing. And he said, here comes the neighbor. And he comes over and he goes, oh my goodness. You bought that hot rod little Mercedes sports car. I just love that car. You know what my buddy does? He reaches in and he pulls a brochure off the seat and he goes, yeah, and this baby will get 24 miles a gallon. And you know another thing about it, it's got these really cool disc brakes.